Take two. I think they're going to cancel Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, you mean in Rhode Island? Or
I think in general. I think Halloween, well, it should be canceled, but I think it's going to get canceled. Not for the kids.
So trick-or-treating or other things?
I think trick-or-treating is going to have to be very creative.
Well, yeah, that's what they've been saying. Is keep your group small, wear your masks.
They're not going to do that.
I know. It's going to get crazy.
No one's going to do that.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be like hocus pocus where everybody's out in large groups.
Well, if everyone wears masks and you're outside, that's helpful. But that's the problem is there are enough people that have given up on taking any kind of precautions.
What's crazy about Halloween is that this is a perfect appetizer for how people are going to prepare for
the holidays.
The other two.
Yep. Which are even worse.
Or
because
three.
Because where we live is New Year's too.
Yeah.
So those three holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, are going to be indoors.
And you know that given the state of 2020, people are going to be very eager to celebrate 2021.
Oh, yeah. They're like, finally, this shit is over. But it's not over just because we turn the calendar.
The year is over.
Right. But the pandemic is not. Just because we want it to be. I think that it's just been repeated so much. I've been doing it too. Like, whenever something bad happens, I'm like, well, this is so on brand for 2020.
Right.
Like, fuck 2020.
Yep. Welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy.
So last week we covered QAnon. And it was, inadvertently good timing to cover QAnon. Because it was, first of all, this whole town hall thing. I know you were super into it, watching Biden's town hall. And
well, actually, I did watch Biden's, and I ended up turning it off and watching Trump's because I just wanted to, because I knew. So
how is that possible? Biden went an hour and a half. Trump only went an hour, from my understanding.
I didn't watch Biden's for very long because I was like, so I ended up watching them. I ended up finished watching it after, but live, I was like, I want to see what everyone is talking about, which is Trump's was more controversial. He was saying dumb shit like usual, and that's what people were going to be talking about. Biden was getting so into the weeds on some of the policy, which on the one hand, I'm like, thank God, like there's a politician talking about policy.
But it was boring.
What a concept. But it was boring. But it was great. I loved the boring.
Well, I heard that.
It was such a relief to hear a politician talk about boring policy.
I heard that it was a bunch of word salad for Biden.
He did ramble quite a bit.
Yeah.
But even so, there was some good content in there. And I was just grateful to see something boring again. Like, not just complete crazy, like spewing, rambling crap.
Yeah. No, I get it. I didn't watch any of it because, I was busy.
Yeah.
Oh, I had like 3 podcasts.
I know.
This week.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, getting back to the topic, our QAnon episode did quite well. And I don't know, obviously, we didn't get a lot of feedback, if any, on it. But I don't know if the people that listened are QAnons, or they're just interested in the topic like we are. But I got to tell you, because of that episode, our global reach was broadened.
Oh, wow.
By that. So that being said, look, if you're listening to us for the first time and you have no idea what we're speaking about, we welcome you to the show. Today we're going to talk about the nature of political correctness, more so how this has to do with the election, continuing our series on the election, and the issues that center around it. We feel that the whole narrative of, people that are on the right side as opposed to the left, not the correct side,
right.
If you ask Cindy, they very, very much endorse Trump for the notion of, he says what's on his mind.
Right.
And a lot of he says what's on his mind is a result of fucking the trend of political correctness and just saying what he wants, how he wants. So we thought political correctness would be a good topic to talk about today. But if you're listening to us for the first time, welcome. We welcome you to the show. If you are interested in QAnon or anything else in our archive that you think would tickle your fancy, we encourage you to dive deep into there and just listen to whatever content you want. Mm-hmm. What's great about this show is that it's not time dependent. The episodes are not dependent on when we release them. They are good to go whenever you want. And honestly, our viewpoints on things so far hasn't changed, and that's to be expected. We started this project in March. Mm-hmm. What's that? 7 months rather? Yeah, right. Nothing's going to change.
Yeah. But that being said, there are a few episodes we did that are kind of tied to these sort of topics.
Yes.
Like political correctness. We did one on cancel culture. We have one on toxic masculinity.
Yes.
We did one on the pandemic, which is more of like in the conspiracy.
It was just a response to pandemic.
Theory thread. Yes. But yeah, there are a few topics that are related, but they're not chronological. You don't have to listen to them in order or anything.
That being said, we'd like to thank those in the United States for listening. Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, Costa Rica, France, India, New Zealand, Poland, Russia. We'd like to thank you for listening to the content. We appreciate it. Thank you. Moreover, in the United States, we'd like to thank our home state of Rhode Island, Florida, Massachusetts, California, New Hampshire, New York, Illinois, Texas, Delaware, Arizona, Ohio, Virginia, Colorado, Indiana, Maryland, Missouri, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Utah, and of course, parts unknown. We appreciate the support. A lot of you guys are consistent listeners. Like I said, the Midwestern part of the United States on the Podbean map is starting to fill in, so we appreciate that. You may differ in your political point of view from either me and or Cindy, but we appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to listen to us. And I know that's a judgment on my behalf based solely on your location, and that's very unfair of me. Maybe you do agree with us. I don't know. Maybe we're your outlet. Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
But either way, we appreciate the support. We appreciate the feedback, so much so that, as I've mentioned before, we have been uploading our episodes onto YouTube, and the QAnon episode by far has been the most listened to episode on YouTube that we have put up. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And this is after YouTube has been scrapping content.
Right. We did that episode right around the time that YouTube, we talked about how Facebook and Instagram were approaching, trying to contain QAnon content, but right after we recorded pretty much was when YouTube said they were no longer going to allow QAnon content. Some QAnon stuff. So I was like, oh crap, what if our thing gets taken down?
I was just like, fuck it.
But whatever. Yeah. So I think it's
very
pretty
punk rock.
It was also pretty obvious from the title that it wasn't, QAnon propaganda. It was a discussion about
Q and nope.
Yep.
Anyways, we appreciate the support. We appreciate the revisiting of our shows weekly. Your support means a lot. That being said, if you'd like to contact us, you can do so. We're on all the socials. You can email us, all of the above, if you please. So, Cindy, why don't you go over those?
Sure. We're on Facebook. It's at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping. We're on Instagram at whileshe'snapping. On Twitter at She's Napping Pod, or you can email us at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
Before we get into the meat and peanut butter of all this, what?
Meat and peanut butter.
I'd like to change it up. Some people thought I was going to say potatoes. I said peanut butter. I wonder what that does sound gross.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
Yeah. Before we get into this, I know throughout the month of October we've been, promoting the fact that we're going to center stuff around the election. I know a lot of this stuff can get heavy. For the past 3 weeks, we've been doing it, and not that we don't like it. We certainly enjoy the conversation, but I understand a lot of people, when they listen to us on a weekly basis, sometimes they want to break from the more serious stuff. So next week, we're going to give you that break. We're going to give you that, inhale, and we're going to talk about Halloween stuff next week. I think that will be fun. I don't know necessarily how we're going to center that topic or what we're going to touch on specifically, but we're going to try to keep it away from the election, try to keep it away from politics, and just give maybe like top Halloween movies or our memories of Halloween or how we like to celebrate, or even if you guys want to contribute how you celebrate Halloween, any special traditions that you have regarding it. We'd love to hear
costumes,
it. Something like that.
Their favorite costume you've ever done, or
sure,
yeah,
the art of making your own, something like that. There you go. But that being said, I want to take a time out for a second, hit the pause button. Why don't you take over because you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to give a shout out and well wishes to our friends at MySpace With You podcast, Sarah and Chris. We listened to your most recent episode and we're super excited. This is another podcast that we've connected with and have really enjoyed interacting with them over the last few months. And they're taking a little break to pursue some pretty badass bucket list dreams they've got. And
they're becoming seamen.
Yeah.
Salty
They're
seamen.
about that boat life. So if you haven't listened to MySpace With You, you should dig back into their archives as well and listen to the content they've put out so far. That this will be their season 1. They're taking a little intermission while they make some transitions. But we've really enjoyed listening to that podcast and getting to know them. So we recommend that you listen to what they've put out and wait for when they come back. But we want to send our best wishes to Chris and Sarah.
Yeah. How I like to approach podcasting, and I do the other shows. I always look at it as a web, right? I always like to expand the web. Have these relationships, have these cross-pollinations as much as possible. And meeting new people it's always great. And specifically those that live way across the country, in California. Never would I have thought that we would have interacted on a semi-personal level, rather.
Well, it turns out they're like the same people. They're like the West Coast version of us.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Just way younger and even though I'm old, and way more personal. What's the word I'm looking at? Way more personal. No, way more personal opportunities. That's the word I was looking for. Because they're going on a boat. And I wish them well. I sent them a message when they said, why don't we just do this? I said during the episode, I said, just fuck it. Just do it. Yeah. What do you have to lose? You have no kids, no debt, as they've mentioned on the show.
Right.
Let's fucking do it.
Perfect opportunity.
And that's for anybody that's listening right now. If you are juggling in your mind whether or not you want to take a leap to do something and you have very little or lack of, any debt or no kids and you don't have anything.
Responsibility, basically.
Yeah, but everyone has a responsibility. But
yeah, but there's levels.
If you're thinking about doing something and you've been holding it off, just fucking do it. It's 2020. This is the year to do it. You can take a strike in 2020.
Yeah. The slogan should just be fuck it.
Just do it. No better time. But yes, as you said, I do wish them well.
Yeah.
And hopefully season 2 is called Salty Seamen With You.
Awesome.
Our salty seamen.
Well, speaking of Chris and Sarah, they were one other thing I wanted to follow up on is that they were 2 of our friends that jumped in to help me with my letter writing campaign the last few weeks. And we did have our the big send for that Vote Forward effort that I was involved in and roped a few people in with me was yesterday. So we're recording this on Sunday. So Saturday the 17th was the big send. And the organization that put this all together, originally the goal was 10 million letters to...
Million.
Yeah, 10 million. And then we surpassed that a few weeks ago. They changed it to 15 million and we've surpassed that. So it's insane. Like 16 million letters went out to voters across the country this weekend, just encouraging them to be a voter. And Chris and Sarah were 2 of the people that jumped in immediately to help with that effort. And I had said a few episodes ago that my personal goal to for myself and for all the folks that volunteered to help with me to get to 1,000, and we did. We got to 1,000. So thanks to everybody who helped write letters. And there are still a few more that are kind of a little different from the big send letters that went out this weekend that are to help voters specifically in Pennsylvania because they have some really specific instructions for how to fill out their mail ballots. So we're still sending out that information this week. So if you want to get involved over the next few days, please contact me. There are like a few thousand addresses that still need to be sent.
Time is limited, so get on it.
Yeah, this is a time-sensitive thing, so let me know ASAP.
With that out of the way, how do you want to structure today's episode when it comes to political correctness? Because sometimes this is an issue with me, and not because I feel, maybe I am to some people, but I don't consider myself to be an old man screaming at clouds saying, "Oh, that's just the way it is. Why can't it be like the old days?" I understand progression. I understand change. But sometimes when I hear things, I say to myself, that's kind of ridiculous, depending on what it is. Most of the time, if it's something that has to do with race or someone's culture, I tend to be more sensitive to that, or I like to think I am. But when it comes to, I don't know, I can't even think of okay, so we'll get to it, but changing state names and stuff.
Yep.
I don't think it's ridiculous. I just don't have a horse in the race, so I just don't care. Because it's not, it's to me, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's more of it doesn't bother me either way, so I just lean towards the people that it does bother, because it doesn't bother me.
That's the in my opinion, that's the objectively correct stance to take, that if it doesn't affect you negatively, but someone else is telling you that it does, if you don't have anything to lose, then why wouldn't you?
But anyways, all right, so why don't you take the lead on this one?
All right, so I was thinking we could talk about, in the first half, just what it is.
Sure.
And I found a really great article from NPR from 2016. It was written right after the 2016 election.
We'll leave that in the description of the show.
Yeah, we'll put the link because it was really good. It kind of describes the progression and the transformation of the term over time. So we could talk about that, and then maybe talk about a few examples like you were just talking about with the name change, and some other ones that we've heard, friends or family talk about over the past few years.
Sure.
And the second half, maybe we could talk specifically about how the two candidates in this election kind of have approached political correctness or been accused of it one way or the other, of being too politically correct or not enough, and maybe talk about some examples.
Okay.
So that NPR article it laid it out in terms of historically what the term political correctness has meant, and what it means now. And I just thought it was really interesting because I had never thought about it in the historical context. I only think about it in terms of, how it's used now, which is basically as an insult. I feel like most of the time, like when someone's like, "Oh, you're being so PC," or "Oh, I'm so sick of this political correctness." Like it's a negative thing. But historically, it was actually used to describe someone who was like politically wise. So a public figure or a politician who was being literally correct in their decisions. And one example was President Lyndon Johnson in 1964. He used it to describe the correct or incorrect way of making decisions. The quote that they had in the article was that he said that he would enact policies, quote, "not because they are politically correct, but because they are right."
Yeah, but isn't that super subjective?
What do you mean?
Well, right and wrong. I assume he means that a moral and ethical.
Right. That's what he's saying. He's saying like that it's not being swayed, but like it doesn't have this like sleazy like being swayed by what's maybe politically good for
like
him.
An influence.
Right. Like he's saying, I'm making a decision because it's the right thing to do.
Got it.
Not because it's politically
that makes sense to
beneficial.
Me. But this would only obviously involve those in politics. It can't involve those in other areas, right? So what is beneficial for the citizens that you govern in a political sense? What is right? That has nothing to do with any outside influence or surge of cash flow or whatever.
Right.
That's how you operate. That is the historical definition of political correctness.
Right. So at that time, it was more viewed, that was a compliment. If someone was saying you're being politically correct, you're being upstanding, you're being wise, you're, being moral. Now it's an insult.
Well, it's funny because I just said, a lot of people in today's day and age that get upset about things being PC, it's because they weren't the way they were. And I'm saying,
right.
Well, the whole term PC isn't what it used to be, so shouldn't you be upset about that?
Right? Yeah, it's kind of ironic. I think because it wasn't really even part of the normal, and maybe it was. I mean, this was before my time, so I'm guessing it wasn't really as much of the mainstream vocabulary as it is now. Like PC is such a, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that was discussed, and I think that's because of the fact that it's sort of been weaponized.
There's no internet back then.
That's true too. Yeah. So I feel like now when
Wait, do you know how it evolved into today's terminology?
I don't know sort of the timeline of it, of
Sure.
when it happened. When I think of sort of the modern era of political correctness in the way that we understand it now, it really kind of, I think back to 2016, like very
Yeah,
recent.
I don't
Probably
remember
a little bit
hearing
before
that in the 90s or
Right.
anything.
I mean, I'm sure it was used. I'm sure it was there, but I don't
It
think
wasn't
it
an
was.
issue.
Yeah. Because I honestly, I mean, in the 2016 election, Trump kind of made it like a pillar of his campaign to make a war on, and there are headlines from 2016 of Trump's war on political correctness. Like he made it something for his base to really get fired up about.
Yeah.
And you started hearing about it all the time. So it's very recent, I think, that it's been weaponized in the way that we think of now.
I mean, yeah, I think that Trump has a lot to do with why this gained steam. A lot of things he does, maybe this is a compliment towards him. A lot of things that he does tends to shine a light on either issues or things that we need to, be better at. And that's not because he's pointing them out and saying we ought to be better. He's actively doing it, and a lot of the population is saying, all right, let's not be like that guy.
Yeah.
Let's
yeah.
let's do the opposite.
Right.
Of that.
Yeah, I think so my read on kind of why or sort of how it's used now is I feel like it's basically a way to invalidate someone's request or a I don't want to say demand, but like and typically this is viewed as sort of the liberal side, the left, saying that's not an okay thing to say. This is offensive. That's not the right term, whatever the case might be. And people who don't agree with that or don't want to have to, learn the new word or rework their vocabulary, come back and just say, oh, you're just being too PC, as a way to just invalidate the request or the point at all. And to me, that's just like so insensitive, which I realize is ironic to describe it that way, because that's the whole point, is that they're saying that the people who are making these types of requests or pointing out these offensive things are being hypersensitive. But I can't understand. And maybe that's because I am a very sensitive person, like at my core. And so I tend to just kind of like what we talked about at the beginning. I don't understand how it affects someone if someone says, well, that's not really the right term. And the one example we were talking about was with all of the racial unrest that's been happening and the learning and, a lot of people have been diving further into anti-racism and things like that. The term African American versus Black.
Yeah, it's weird because, if we hop back into our Wayback Machine, it's no secret to people that we're big fans of Everybody Loves Raymond. And this is pretty much where it shined a light on it for me, because they did an episode about faux pas, which is sort of, I don't know if you can use that as a similar term to political correctness, but
yeah, I think that makes sense
in a way. So the mom or the grandma said, you said this person was Black. And they said, don't use that term.
Right.
Say African American, as if African American was
Well, she defended herself.
Yeah, she said, I didn't say
you came in
Black.
here saying he was Black. And she said, no, I didn't. I said he was an African American.
Right.
Like,
And
that made
African American
it okay.
at the time was the acceptable term. And come to find out, and this is something that I recently discovered because
Me too.
of the social injustice to people of color. That's another term that I wasn't necessarily familiar with, is that African American is not offensive, I don't think, or maybe it is. It's just incorrect to use, and they prefer Black. But I have been, sort of, I don't want to say trained, but I've been sort of maybe trained is the right
it's just
word. It's just the way
I've always known it.
It has like this. If I say, "Oh, that person's Black," it's just, ooh, that sounds like
it feels weird.
I'm saying something negative about them because of the climate of how things are in a political and social way.
Sure.
But that's not how I mean it. It's just I think they take it. I shouldn't use words like they. Here I go.
Yeah.
But I think that community takes pride of the term black because it is what they are, and not as people, but why hide away from it? I don't know. Am I making sense?
No, you are. You're making sense. And I think that reflects a lot of the reading that I've done and the conversations that I've had and listened to. And it's a relearning. And I think the difference is when someone gets defensive, if you were to point out, like, actually, if you had said something to describe someone and you said they were African American, I'd say, actually, I just read something that talked about this. And it seems like, and we should also say, obviously, there's variation within any community or any individual person might have a certain preference or have a different take. But in general, the conversation is suggesting that black is a perfectly acceptable, if not preferred, term. And so if you had said, describe someone as African American, and I told you I just read something that said that's actually black is better to say, and you were like, oh, well, no, fuck that, I don't want to, I'm all set with this political correctness, I'm gonna, like, I've always said African American, there's nothing wrong with it, I don't mean anything offensive, it's like whatever.
I do believe it's true that I don't mean anything, or this person theoretically doesn't mean anything offensive.
Of course, but I'm saying if you put up your defense and you're like, ugh, I don't have time to keep up with, like, it's just so lazy and ignorant. Like, I don't have a lot of tolerance for that, because I feel like it's okay if, like you said, because that's how we were brought up and it's the terminology and vocabulary that we're familiar with, if it doesn't mean that from here on out, now that I told you that black is generally the preferred term, if that's the case, then you will never say the words African American again, or you will never, like, it will inevitably happen because it's ingrained in you. And I don't think anyone's, especially if you come across with the right intent, no one's gonna, come at you for that if you're doing it with, compassion and you have humility about it and you're willing to accept. Or indifference,
honestly. Or indifference.
Sure. But my point is, I guess it's how you react when someone corrects you or gives you information that you weren't previously privy to. Someone tries to educate you in a kind way. If you put up your defenses and say, no, I'm all set with this PC bullshit, I don't want to deal with, like, whatever, versus saying, oh, I didn't know that, thank you. Like, and then you just make an effort. Like, it doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect, but you just make an effort. Like, I don't really understand what the problem is from that perspective.
I know we're going to get into more examples in depth in the second half of the show. I guess if I'm going to play devil's advocate, it doesn't seem that there is a objective truth towards it. I think things sway back and forth.
Sure.
Maybe, and I don't know the history of this, so maybe at one point in time the preferred term was black, and then it changed to African American, and now it's back to black. I'm spitballing. I do not know, but I think that's the frustrating part about it. Maybe to those that are unwilling to bend, I don't agree with it. I'm just trying to offer, understanding, or I don't know,
reason.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I maybe that's it. And because I don't want to call it a slippery slope, but it's always, I shouldn't even say always changing, because
but it is.
No,
but you're right. It does. I mean, what I'm saying is,
also in that light may devolve into something or go back.
But
I don't know.
But that's what I mean is just to go through the world as a compassionate human being who is willing to evolve with our society when progress is made. Why would you not want to operate that way? And if you're getting frustrated and that's too much to ask for you to attempt to use terminology that's not offensive once someone kindly and respectfully educates you on something that's changed, I just feel like that is like just the definition of privilege too, in that I don't have time for this. When all someone's asking you to do is to maybe relearn a word or use a different term or kind of change your vocabulary a little bit. Like, I just feel like that's just not a huge ask of someone who's not even, especially if you've never been on the receiving end of something offensive.
I don't think it is a huge ask. I don't think it is at all. For me, I can't imagine myself in a position where I'd have a lot of opposition towards something that I say, because I tend not to put myself in these situations, I feel. And maybe a lot of that is just inadvertent or fortunate circumstances that I just don't. But I do think there is something to the notion that if someone corrected me, when it comes to anything, when someone corrects me, I mean, I don't know anything. So when someone corrects me about things that I don't know about, I tend to take their word for it, unless you're a QAnon. And in that regard, I just say, fine. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me. And again, going back to the example I said in the beginning, of that loose example, if it doesn't matter to me, which it doesn't, and there's a large group of people that feel, really put back by it, or it does sort of insult their existence in a way. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it doesn't matter to me one way, why would it matter to me the other?
Right. Why wouldn't you default to the accommodating the people who are offended? Like, if it doesn't make a difference in your life, like we're talking, the example we're using is one of the questions on the ballot for us in this election is to change the official name of the state of Rhode Island. It's actually the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Sure. And nobody says that. I bet half the people who live in Rhode Island don't even know that that's the full name of the state.
I've never referred to it as such.
No, of course not. But I've seen such bullshit arguments of people saying like, oh, you're trying to change history. Our children need to learn the history of our state. And I'm like,
but they still can.
Right. The name of the state and how it's been written up until 2020 is still going to be written that way in all of the historical texts, every document that's been written until now. They're not going to go back and white it out like a Mandela effect kind of thing. Like, that's not going to happen. It's still going to be there, and you can teach it as that history. Oh, up until 2020, we had this name, and it was changed
Assuming
for this reason,
passed.
if it gets passed. But I've also heard people being like, that they take pride in the fact that we have they think it's funny that we're the smallest state and we have the longest name in the country. I'm like, all right, come on.
I don't necessarily think it's what is being people are offended about. I think it's the fact that, and again, playing devil's advocate in a way, because I can see some truth to this. I think it's the fact that there are people getting offended, it seems like, over a lot of things. And I think there's a fatigue to those that are saying, can't say this anymore, can't say that anymore, can't say this, can't do that, can't say that. Everyone's offended. Everyone's offended about something. And to me, I'm just saying, I get that. Mm-hmm. And I think some things are kind of ridiculous to get offended over. For instance, let's go back to the fat acceptance episode. We had people respond to us say, oh, the O word. And I said, what the fuck is the O word? And obese. That offends me. What? No, I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to refer to a medical term as the O word.
Well, so if we want to make that comparison, just because we need to pull out examples to illustrate this. If we're going to compare the term obesity to the word plantations in the state's name, obesity is generally an accepted term in our society to describe the physical state in a medical state. It's it's a diagnosis that's used by medical professionals, and it's discussed in the medical field as like just a statement of fact.
Yes.
So, and there's not a lot of other interpretation of that word. It's not even used as an insult, I would say. Like, you're not like, oh, that guy's so obese. Like, people don't really use it as a way to insult people or imply anything negative. I think it's a pretty like straightforward kind of just objective word that has a medical. Okay. Plantation, people are arguing it just means a farm. No, it fucking doesn't. No. It means, it is inextricably tied. That word plantation sets in any, like, in very generally speaking, like, I think your average American, when you hear the word plantation, it rings a bell in the back of your mind, connecting it to slavery. It just
I honestly don't think people think about it.
No, but there's a reason why people want it changed, and it's because it is so common that word is connected to slavery. And even in the definition of it, it's connected to enslaved workers or very low wage workers on an agricultural property. Like, that is what plantation means. And it's so tied to the concept of slavery that it's not, it's very different from the word obese for that reason.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying, to me, the level of the level of offensiveness towards various things is what I think there's opposition to, not the word itself.
Sure, but I also think the example you're using, I just don't think it's a good example of the obese thing, because that's not something that you see on a regular basis.
I don't
like
disagree.
That's a very small community
I think those that
takes issue.
That offer pushback to constantly having to learn and to evolve in their terminology and say, I'm not even going to pay attention. No, I'm tired of all this PC bullshit. I think that is what they're tired of, having to always constantly adjust. And the fact that a lot of people, more often than not, being offended over what they're offended over is valid. But there are some instances, like the obese term, where it's absolutely ridiculous. And I say, no, you're taking it way too far.
Okay, so I have two responses. If you're, again, I can't get behind I can't say anything anymore. It's like, I just don't have a lot of sympathy because, and I'm speaking as a white person who's like very recently starting to pay attention, like a lot of people in 2020. And it's just, to me, I'm like, it's a learning opportunity. It's for me to be a better person and to be more, just to not cause harm where I don't mean to. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to be better? And why wouldn't you want to be part of progress, positive progress that's more inclusive and less harmful
I hear what you're saying, and I
understand.
agree with you for the most part, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think obese falls in that category.
I agree with you. I'm not even talking about
That's
that.
what I'm saying. So if someone said to you, that offends me, I think you are in the right to say, that is ridiculous.
Okay, but I'm talking about things like the word plantation and the state name.
I totally agree with you on that. I'm saying when you have something like that, and then on the other side, someone saying, oh, please don't use the term obese, I can understand why someone's like, what the fuck? What am I supposed to say?
But what I'm saying is the example, like the obese one that you're giving, is very rare.
Sure.
Usually the things that people are calling for change with are things more like the state name and the word plantation. Or like, so I feel like most of the time it's legitimate. And I think to make the excuse of, oh, I just get exhausted because sometimes every now and then there's something that's ridiculous and I don't care, or I just don't completely disagree or whatever. I just think that's lazy. And I
get it. I get it. So how do we balance out the ridiculousness and the validity?
I think it's easy because the vast majority of things are valid and it's an opportunity for you to learn and grow and be better.
Okay.
And I think one of the interesting things that I've seen, I think another example we want to touch on was Baby, It's Cold Outside.
Well, hold on. Let's pause because we're running late. Let's take a break and we can talk about Baby, It's Cold Outside on the way back. Hang tight.
So this is an example of something I think is fascinating in the way that, and it has to do with social media and the internet and all that. But the whole Baby, It's Cold Outside controversy, quote unquote.
That never happened?
Yes, that's my whole point. So I don't even know if this is a real term or if I just call it this. I call it fake outrage. And I don't even remember if I've heard that somewhere else or if that's even a thing. But I guess my whole thing behind that is you see people complaining about something like the lyrics of Baby, It's Cold Outside.
Right.
And it might have stemmed from a very, very small number of people taking issue with it and then being vocal about it.
Right.
And then most people hear about that issue by people who are complaining about it being an issue.
When they
you know
don't
what I
know
mean?
the
Like,
source
right. Like if I were to share something on Facebook being like, oh my God, people want to change Baby, It's Cold Outside because they think it's offensive and it's derogatory towards women and it's like promoting rape culture. And then you see me posting something complaining about it and then you also share it complaining about it. That's how most people see it. It's not because people who take issue with it are sharing it and saying, this is promoting rape culture. I disagree with the Baby, It's Cold Outside. We should get rid of it. It shouldn't be a Christmas song. We should change the lyrics. Most people are not actually taking that stance. I feel like most people are pretty reasonable. Like, I'm a very liberal person who obviously thinks political correctness isn't really a huge deal. But even I don't think that Baby It's Cold Outside is really, like, that's not the biggest issue that we have.
Well, we should, all right, so what he says, obviously it's this man in the song is saying, don't leave.
Right.
It's cold, it's snowing. And I don't even know the genesis of the song. Maybe it wasn't even that bad, and he just maybe did want to hook up with this woman, and she's kind of drunk.
No, I don't even think it's that. I think
she says, "What's in this drink?"
Right, and I think the whole thing is it's you have to put yourself in the position of the time too. This was like in the 50s.
Sure, yeah.
And it was very taboo for a girl to sleep overnight with a man that she wasn't married to or whatever. And so yes, there's a little bit of misogyny
of course,
but it's also, to me, it speaks to the fact that at that time, women being promiscuous or being like casually dating or whatever was so looked down upon that she, in the song, the lyrics are her making excuses as to why she can't stay, even though she wants to.
Right. And she says, I think what's in this drink was sort of slang for, she knows she has been drinking booze, but she's like, oh, didn't know it was this strong. What's in this? I think that's at the time was in a way of saying, I didn't mean to get this.
Or it's just something else it's another excuse for her to stay.
Well, no,
like,
yes.
It's not implying that he drugged her drink.
No, but that's what the outrage.
Right, but now in modern times, when you listen to the lyrics, you can certainly have that interpretation. Right. But I think by and large, most people understand the context of the song, when it was written, and what the actual message was. And I just, as someone who generally is very liberal and doesn't try to or tries to be politically correct the majority of the time, I don't really take issue with Baby It's Cold Outside. I just think we have bigger fish to fry. I don't think that's on the top of the mind of people who are fighting for political correctness.
I don't think it was ever a thing.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But people made it a thing. And so I feel like that can happen, and I feel like that contributes. Like, that is something that I could imagine people who react to being told something isn't okay to say, or a certain word isn't okay, for them to be like, oh, can't say anything anymore. Like, I can hear them being like, oh, we can't even play Baby It's Cold Outside anymore because people get offended. It's like, no, actually, people aren't really that offended by that. Like, you're just getting sucked into the fake outrage on social media.
Right, but I don't think that does any favors to those that are fighting for adjustment in terminology, right? Because
but that's
like I said,
no fault of the people.
I'm not saying
that.
there is. I'm not saying they're pushing stuff. I'm saying that there's that fatigue. The fatigue of people saying, I can't say anything anymore.
Right, but the irony is that the reason that people even become aware of that is because of the people who are fatigued by it complaining about it.
Sure.
And that's how it spread in the first place.
I just think that there are certain things that we can look at and understand the time and say, yes, we are different at that time than that time. We have made progress in the way we we term things, and we don't have to look back at that with any sort of angst or any sort of axe to grind and be so pissed off about it. Like, you watch Neil, Jesus, easy for me to say everything today. You watch Deal or No Deal, and you said the way they, I don't want to say treat, because I don't think they mistreat the women, the models, but they certainly treat them.
It's the way they're characterized and talked about.
They're treated as models from 2003.
They're treated as objects.
Yes, and it's 2003. Consider the time. This is 17 years ago.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like that long ago.
It doesn't, but to me, I say, yeah, there's been a lot of progress made.
Right, and I think that's a good thing.
So I don't think it's not. I'm just saying I don't think there should be any sort of outrage towards Howie Mandel and Deal or No Deal and say that show should be scrapped off the face of the earth.
Right, because you can argue
we need that
they didn't know any better, sort of. Like, it wasn't part of the mainstream narrative to pay attention to these things. It doesn't mean it was right. It doesn't mean that it's good that we ever objectified women in that way. But I'm saying, like, right, to place blame when it was widely accepted and nobody was speaking out about it, it doesn't mean that it was okay. But it means there wasn't like a widely accepted alternative to that narrative. Like that was just the way that it was.
Yes.
But it's a good thing that we've moved away from it. And it's a good thing that when, if they were made, the producers of that show or the hosts of the show were made aware of how this was coming across and how and why it wasn't okay, and they should maybe shift gears into how they treat the models or characterize the models and their role, and they make that change. I just can't fathom the eye roll. Oh, we got to be politically correct. I can't objectify women anymore.
That's why I'm saying we need those things in a historical sense to say, okay, this is what we need to learn from. Because when you do remove it, right, when you do remove these if you completely scrap Deal or No Deal from the internet, I think there's value to having it there, or for having it for people to view, to say, this was not okay.
I mean, I get what you're saying. No one's saying we should take, it's on.
No one's promoting this. I'm just saying I think there is value in you and I sitting down, watching Deal or No Deal from 2003, and you saying the way they treat these women is disgusting. They're objectifying them. I think there's value in having that understanding and being able to identify it.
Sure. I think until we make enough progress, but we don't even need that because the narrative changes so completely that that's all we know is to not act that way. I can see that.
There's probably some shit today that we aren't even aware of.
Sure. And I think that's okay, though. Like, it's okay that it's constantly evolving and you're constantly learning.
But my point is,
going to make a mistake.
There is a good chance that you and I do something that in 17 years from now, people are going to find offensive.
Sure.
And we would say, look, I guess we didn't know any better, but at the same time, this is just how it was.
Right. But I think that the important thing is how you respond.
I know that, but it's not inconceivable for our child to say you guys were gross.
I agree. And I hope she calls me out.
But my point is to say, yes, you can identify things that we did that were, in poor taste, but we shouldn't be villainized for it.
I agree.
But I think that's the difference, right? I think and this ties into cancel culture, right? When you look at and again, I don't have a horse in the race. I don't care. But when you look at people trying to take down, for instance, Christopher Columbus statues, to me, I say, first of all, I didn't even notice it was there. So it doesn't matter to me if it's there or not. If someone removed this, you would have to give me a specific landmark to where it was.
But here's the thing. Do you recognize how much of a privilege that is to not notice things like that?
I get it. My point is that I would say, I do think if you want to remove it and it's voted to get removed and whatnot, fine. I'm not going to fight against it because I don't care if it's there or not. It doesn't bother me. Again, I lean towards those that are offended by it. So if it means that much for you to not be there, sure, I got your back. But for me, I do think, and this is not my total attitude about it, but I do think there is something to the point of there is value in having it there, not to be glorified, but there is value to
put it in a museum, put it in a history book.
Yes, I agree.
Put a picture of it somewhere.
Sure, it doesn't have to be in the center of the city.
It shouldn't be celebrated, and that's what a monument or a statue is for.
It should be in.
No one's saying erase the memory of Christopher Columbus forever and no one ever speak his name again. No one is saying that. They're saying don't put it on a literal pedestal.
But I do think there would be pushback if it was in a museum.
Okay, pushback. I don't care.
But I don't think there should be pushback towards that. I think because this is an important figure.
Oh, you mean pushback from? Okay, yeah, no, I don't see the problem if it's put somewhere as an.
In
it's
a
just
historical
like how we
context.
Like when we visited South Carolina a few years ago, and we visited like the Civil War monuments and the forts and like the museums, and we even visited a plantation that had the what used to be the slaves' quarters, the houses, and it gave but it was in the context of history and how we've progressed and the struggles that those people went through and why it wasn't okay and how fucked up it was that this is how these.
But that's what I mean.
Functioned.
I do think there is value in having those things available to you.
And that's different from it being on a literal pedestal.
I don't disagree
Okay.
with that. I'm saying I am for it being removed from public spaces that sort of say, look at how great this person was and whatnot. I get that. But if there was pushback for it to be in a museum, I'd say, no, I do think you're being overly offensive.
I see what you're saying.
That.
Okay, I thought you were saying like people who wanted to keep it up in the first place
No.
push back for it going into museums
I'm
because
saying
they just want to keep it where it is.
If the state of Rhode Island said, okay, we're going to remove it from Providence, but we're going to put it in this museum, and people were like, no, get rid of it, I'd say, that's going too far.
Maybe. And there probably are people who have that stance, but I think it's a minority. I think that the vast majority of people who are supportive of removing these monuments or changing names of schools or places that do celebrate bad people who did bad things and don't want their legacy to be celebrated. I think the majority of those people are okay with a shift in how we present it and how we view these people. That's all. They want to change the narrative behind it and not celebrate and make it sound like they're heroes.
Okay, what other examples?
I guess that's most of the examples that are kind of like the general ones that we've heard of. I mean, there's also like the recent, Aunt Jemima and the syrup thing, and people got upset about that. Like, oh, I can't even have my syrup in the morning. Like, yes, you can.
No, you can definitely.
Did you ever really even notice? Like,
So it's funny. I thought Aunt Jemima, the syrup, was the Mrs. Butterworth, and I
think a lot of people did.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I really like that bottle.
The shape of the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But turns out it's not the same at all.
I'm sorry, your nostalgia is not more important than the mental health of
it's not.
Black
I'm not
people
saying it is.
who get. No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying in general. Like, I cannot get behind that. It's so. I know I'm probably overusing the word privilege, but it just is like to not be affected by that one way or the other. And you keep describing your indifference to these things. The reason you're indifferent is because you're white. You're a straight male.
I shouldn't. Saying I'm indifferent, that's not how I want to come across about that.
I know what you mean.
It means that it doesn't offend me, but
because it doesn't affect you.
Right. I'm sympathetic towards those that it does.
I know you are. But it's a statement of fact that if we're talking about things that have to do with race, then as white people, we are indifferent. We have the privilege of being indifferent, of not being affected by these things.
Sure. Yes.
Or if we're talking about gender inequality or LGBTQ and stuff, like, we are straight people, so that those issues don't affect us, and that is a privilege that we don't have to we don't have to walk through the world worrying about these things. So that's why I can't get behind that. Like, it's, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it.
No, I get it. I understand. It's, when it comes to the Aunt Jemima syrup thing, to me that's so trivial that
exactly.
I don't care.
It's trivial to us but it's not trivial
to have an outrage about it.
That's what I mean.
In terms of, they're canceling this, is to me that's just, does it really matter to you?
Right.
But I don't think that's erasing history. We're talking about,
of course not,
labels and food choices here, and it's not even that good syrup. Let's be honest.
It's not.
It's really not. But to me, there's just I kind of get the fatigue. So when someone says, when someone calls it the China virus about COVID, that is racist the core.
We can tie it back into the election now.
Yeah, that is racist to the core because the Kung flu or the Chinese virus. But for me, and again, I can see why this would be racist, but if for the sake of argument, before it was discovered that it was a COVID, a coronavirus, right? And they just categorize it as, the virus from Wuhan. The virus
called the Wuhan virus, I think.
I don't think that's racist because it's just describing the origin of
what.
And then when this is before they knew what it was,
right? And
then when they found out, they called it COVID-19 because it's a coronavirus from the year 2019. And I say, okay, yeah, now we know everything about, well, not everything. We know
we
the
have a
origin.
name for it.
Yes, let's call it that. To call it the Chinese virus, to me, is straight up racist. Yeah. And to say, we can't call anything anymore.
Yeah.
I'm saying, no. No.
It's also in the context of the rhetoric. And now we're talking specifically about the president and how he's constantly blaming China for this global pandemic. And sure, it originated in China. That's a statement of fact. But to take it one step further, to then, like you said, now we have a name for it. It's called COVID-19. Just fucking call it COVID-19.
Right.
Like, why do you have to perpetuate this, like, racial, nationalistic, like, why?
Well, all right, again, let's play devil's advocate. We call it the Spanish flu.
Yeah, when was that?
1918.
Yeah.
But we still call it the Spanish flu.
Do we know what it actually was?
Yeah, it didn't come from Spain.
No, but, like, is there the equivalent of, like, how we're calling this COVID-19 now?
Well,
We know what
flu.
it was.
It was influenza.
Was it like an H1N1? Like, it was a...
I think it was.
That's what I mean. I don't even know. But here's the difference. We don't have a readily available alternative that's, like, well known to everybody. Everybody fucking knows it's called COVID-19.
I get it. But in their eyes, they might say, well, we call it the Spanish flu. Why can't we call this the
because
Chinese
it's 100
virus?
years later and we know better.
But today we still refer
because we don't
to
know.
it
Okay,
as
so
the Spanish
but
flu.
if it was a readily available information to people that there was an alternative name that was very well known and we all knew what to call it,
why don't we just come up with an alternative name right now?
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
But my point is that it's not. You're talking about hypothetical, like a different reality. In the reality that we live in, no one knows the alternative, like the COVID-19 equivalent of what we would call the Spanish flu.
There actually might be.
Maybe. I'm not aware of it. But my point is it's not as prevalent. I'm like, if I found out that there was another word for the Spanish flu, I would call it whatever that other name was.
It was an H1N1.
It was H1N1.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the Spanish flu, also known as the 1918 flu pandemic, was an unusual... Pandemic, sorry. Did I say pandemic?
Yeah.
Was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza.
Interesting. So
but,
I don't know.
But no one calls, and I'm saying I don't know. Maybe there is some sort of backlash towards that, but I am not aware of anyone so far. And again, there might be saying that's racist, calling it the Spanish flu.
Sure, but again, I'm saying the context and the rhetoric matters. I mean, he's also constantly blaming China and making it a thing. You know what I mean? Like he's making it into a thing about us versus them and them being incompetent or whatever and being at fault for this global pandemic. And also, I think there's a difference in the time. Like 100 years, there's been 100 years of people calling it the Spanish flu. Like it is ingrained into our vocabulary, into our narrative, into history that's what it's been called for 100 years. COVID-19, it was only the Wuhan virus, whatever, for a few months before we knew it was called COVID-19. So it's not a big ask to change your vocabulary, whereas it is to change the vocabulary that's been widely accepted for 100 years.
I think in this instance, the object of or the aspect of having an enemy for people that support Trump is very important. Whether it be the deep state,
it's for everything.
Whether it be the
immigration.
You need an enemy, and that rallies the base up, and that fires them up. So having these terms to place blame on people other than you is the driving force of his whole campaign.
Right.
And it really brings out a sense of, for lack of a better way to put it, a warped sense of American pride to these people, to say we are the best, we are other than you. Right. So we need to classify things as such.
Well, it's also I feel like it's a lot of Trump's rhetoric is putting political correctness and basically using progressive language or evolving your language into things that are more inclusive and honoring diversity and things like that, pitting that against free speech. It's saying they're trying to shut you up. You should be able to say whatever you want. Don't listen to this PC shit. Like those two things are not.
You can say whatever you want.
Of course, but again, not without consequence. Like if you are saying something that is generally socially unacceptable at this point, like we're talking about, everyone knows it's called COVID-19. If you run around calling it the Kung flu, you're going to sound like an asshole and people are going to respond.
Yeah.
So yes, you're free to say it 100%. That's your First Amendment right. The government cannot take any action against you. You're not going to be arrested for being an asshole. but that still makes you an asshole, and you should expect consequences from your peers if you're saying things that are just socially unacceptable and you're not like making the effort to do better. And like, I don't understand how people can say that by being politically correct, you're infringing on my free speech.
I think it's because people don't like to be challenged. I think people don't like, I think making adjustments, especially social adjustments, it's very uncomfortable. It's very, it's sort of like a slap in the face to the reality that you thought.
Sure, yeah. It's super awkward
to
be corrected, and yeah.
And I think rather than facing not the consequences, facing the reality of that and sort of making those uncomfortable adjustments, because let's be honest, if you're making a social adjustment or sociological adjustment, it's uncomfortable. It really is. It's not something that comes natural. And if it does come natural to people, you are very, very, very few and far between. And I think rather than face that, you sort of combat it. And that goes with a lot of things. Again, not to make direct parallels, but that goes to things like, again, obesity. We don't want to face the reality, or people that are of this community don't want to face the reality that what they're doing could cause a level of self-harm or have dire consequences to their health, and they don't want to face that reality till it's too late, until something happens. And it's sort of like a reflective kind of thing in hindsight, saying, I wish I made different choices. So with those that are making these politically incorrect statements and really sticking to them and saying, no, I can say what I want, it's my American right, blah, blah, blah. And then they're sort of isolated and alienated. It's sort of, oh, maybe I should have adjusted my terminology, something so simple as that. And I wouldn't maybe be so lonely.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think we're generally getting better at it, at being okay with being uncomfortable. And
yeah, I don't think this is a huge issue. I should note that.
Yeah, I feel like it was more in 2016. I mean, Trump's rhetoric in 2016 was really strong on political correctness. Like, he really made that a central issue. I think now there are so many other issues that are more at the forefront, so it hasn't been talked about much in this election. But just in general, I thought it was kind of funny that when I was trying to find clips or like examples of this with the two candidates, I searched for like politically correct or political correctness Joe Biden and political correctness Donald Trump, and there were literally like no results for Joe Biden.
Oh, I can think of one.
Me too. I know what you're gonna say. Go ahead.
You're not black.
Yeah, you ain't black.
Yeah,
I know. So, but in general, I think that's obviously like it's because Trump has made it a pillar of his campaign in 2016 that there's so many instances of him talking about political correctness, not necessarily an example of them being politically incorrect. You know what I mean? So yes, that was an example of Joe Biden being politically incorrect.
Yeah.
But again, I think the response and the context and what you do before and after you say something like that matters. And I think he's acknowledged, and he's largely, that's an isolated incident. That's an example of someone making a mistake and being humble enough.
Yeah, but it's really hard to be forgiven when you're running for president when it comes to isolated.
Is it though?
Look.
Look how many things were forgiven for our current president. Come on.
Okay, I think it's really hard for those that are seeking an alternative.
I get it. Yeah, I understand. But to me, I get so frustrated by that because the bar right now is so low that I just feel like it should take more than a couple of examples or a couple of gaffes or a couple of faux pas to bring you below the bar that we have right now. I just don't understand how that's even comparable in any way to all the things that have been forgiven in the last 4 years.
All right. Well, we went a little bit over an hour.
Yeah, I was expecting this one to be kind of lengthy.
No, I mean, this may be my, total just oblivious nature to people that are getting offended by certain things, rightly or wrongly. I haven't really heard of anything recently that people that there isn't a hot button issue outside of racial inequality right now that people are saying you can't use that term as much as it was, like you said, in 2016.
Well, I think there's just more of an approach of learning right now. Like
Yeah.
everyone's under the understanding, like we've all been blind to these issues by and large. Like there's a lot of white people who have not been paying attention, and now we are. And I think I'm sure there are the Black people who are like, Jesus Christ, like we really have to keep explaining this. Like,
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Like they've been saying these things for a very long time and we have not been listening. But even so, I still think there's a little bit more of a forgiving nature of like everyone's finally paying attention and we're learning and we're having these conversations, and it's okay that it's uncomfortable. I think that is kind of the general atmosphere right now.
I mean, I'm always wrong, so I don't really care about being
when it
wrong.
comes to racial conversations, we probably both are a lot of times.
Yeah. But it's just, I think the thing that we should really focus on moving forward is that those that bitch about, things, everyone's offended. Typically, they're boomers, first of all. I don't really know a lot of millennials today, or even people younger than us, that, everyone's offended over everything. I don't, or being really resistant
to change.
To make those sort of social adjustments. It's mostly the boomers, and I just think there are some people you can't reach due to the time that they were brought up in, right? And I do think that we will suffer the same sort of resiliency towards it, or resistance, rather, in about 15, 20 years' time, when our child says, no, you can't do that anymore. And I'm thinking, what? I try to put myself in the position of those that are older than me, that have been doing this, and that has been widely accepted in their generation for years and years and decades even, and then a younger generation, or even younger generation than that, says, no, you can no longer say that. I understand what?
Yeah, of course. To be confused, to have
no,
it
I
be a
understand
challenge.
who the fuck, you're like 12. I'm not saying I agree with it. I can understand someone saying, you're like my grandchild.
But we've had a very minor experience with that, just with the example we talked about using African American versus Black. We've had 30 plus years of using one term, and now we're being told that there's a better one, or one that's preferred, or whatever. And I did not have that visceral reaction of, oh my
because
God, I can't even say that anymore.
We're told by our peers.
Maybe.
We'll see.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll do a follow-up episode in 20 years.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for today. Like I said, next week we're going to be talking about Halloween stuff, so we're going to take a break from the serious stuff and maybe get a little bit more fun. And the following week after that, it's going to be the weekend before the election. Actually, the episode will be released the day before the actual election date. So that day we're just going to sort of freestyle about how we feel the election has, or rather the candidacy and the campaigns have been going.
Well, there's going to be a final, possibly. There's going to be another debate before that.
And I do want to give our predictions, and I think that will be fun.
It's going to stress me out.
If you want to leave yours, listener, please do. But that's going to do it. If you liked what you've heard, if you liked the back and forth, we appreciate you getting this far. You can download this show on all your favorite podcatchers. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, or even on the YouTubes. As I said, you can like and subscribe to us on there. If you have the time and you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please take the opportunity to give us 5 stars and a quick review. Helps grow this show even more than it already has, broadens the horizons, and like I said, it expands the web. So we appreciate the feedback, positive or negative, and even if it is negative, please still give us 5 stars, because that would help us a lot. If you want to go over the socials, you can.
Sure, yeah. And if your podcast platform doesn't have a review or rating system, you can also rate us and leave us a review on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping. We're on Instagram at whileshe'snapping, on Twitter at she'snappingpod, or you can send us an email at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
Hit us up and let us know your favorite Halloween tradition, memory, costume, candy, even, movie, whatever. All things Halloween. Hit us up, let us know. And until next week, peace.
Bye.